Hello, guys, and welcome to Season 2 of the Penny Podcast. I'm Andrés Bear, I'm in 12th grade, and I'm the Coppell student media web producer. If this is your first time tuning in, the Penny Podcast is a weekly podcast that incorporates entertainment and interview elements. This week, our CSM highlight goes to Lilly Gorman for her article, Escape Coppell Bubble for Dallas as Cultural Experiences Await, published under our opinions section. I'll recite the opening to her article. It is 10 p.m. on Elm Street in Dallas. Your typical Southern California rock band takes a tiny stage with a crowd of about 80 people spread out in the minimal space available. With stomachs full of pizza and cherry coke, adrenaline pumps as the time approaches for live music. To read the rest of Lily's piece, head over to coppellstudentmedia.com. This week on One Shot, Ghostbusters Afterlife is set to hit theaters summer 2020, starring Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, and Paul Rudd as they embark on a journey with connections to the classic Ghostbuster films. I'm personally really looking forward to this movie, as it seems like it will continue where Ghostbusters 2 left off in 1989. Now, on to the main show. What is your full name, grade, and favorite color?
Hi, my name is Pramika Kadari, and I'm the Executive News and Enterprise Editor for The Sidekick. I'm in 12th grade, so I'm a senior in high school, just like Andrés. And my favorite color is probably actually light pink or purple now. It used to be blue just because when I was little I didn't want to admit that I liked pink and purple for some reason because it seemed too girly, which seemed like a bad thing for some reason. But I actually do really like those colors.
So for me, it was the other way around. I've always liked pink and just now started to like green and blue. It's boy colors, right? What does your position on staff entail?
Well, basically, my main job is that I'm in charge of the news section. So I assign like stories and I edit stories. And I also write a Q&A every issue called Faces of CISD, where I interview like an influential member of CISD in order to celebrate the 60-year CISD anniversary. And I have a few other parts of my job that aren't directly related to the news section. I'm also the enterprise editor, of course, so I help decide the C-spread for every issue, and I'm also supposed to get an in-depth story out on the first of every month. And I'm also in charge of a few other things like SNO badges and things like that.
Okay. How have the past few months been for your sections? Any interesting developments, you could say?
News has been doing fairly well for the past few months. It's been getting an average of 3 to 4 stories a week, not including smaller daily news stories and stories about CHS 9. But I definitely want to grow a lot next semester. For Enterprise, we have been hitting our minimums of in-depth stories and center spreads have been getting done, but they're not as in-depth as I hope to as of now, and I really want to dig deeper into some of these topics going forward.
Awesome. Do you prefer quality over quantity when it comes to your stories?
It depends. I think sometimes people get too weighed down in the quality, and that's why they don't meet their deadline. I don't approve of that. I think sometimes news can be quick and to the point, like Lasya Shanta's core reconstruction story that she's working on right now. It's very quick. It's just about a few small things that the core is changing about their building, and I wouldn't want that to get delayed because she wants to like perfect it more than she already has. But at the same time, of course, you shouldn't just be, to borrow an example that my advisor, Mr. Wofford, used earlier, you shouldn't just be cranking out like 15 Q&As every semester. It would be better to have like 6 solid stories in news than 15 Q&As.
As someone who has been on staff for 3 years straight, how have you seen the news section evolve?
I like that the news section is kind of divided 3 ways this year. I was a little bit hesitant about it when that was first announced because I just had never seen that before and I didn't know if it was needed. But now that I see it in action, I see that because we have an editor for CHS 9, an editor for daily news, and then also myself for like the other news stories, it helps us like go more in depth into each of those sections. So I see like a lot of quick daily news stories going up, like at least 2 or 3 on the spots every week. And then I see a lot more CHS 9 stories than we had last year when Christine was just in charge of CHS 9 as well, just because like that's Shivi Sharma's entire job is to handle CHS 9. So she's not going to focus on anything else. So obviously we will get CHS 9 content in. And I feel like that was a good choice to have because news covers so many different things. If it's just one person, you probably won't go as in-depth into each of the areas of news. And we've also been getting a lot more videos this year than we have in past years. And that's partly because we have a video editor this year, I think, Charlotte Vanyo. And we get a video most weeks now for news.
Okay, so things flow out easier than they did before,
Yeah.
you say? Okay. What is one news story that you consider near perfect in execution and purpose?
I really, really loved Karen Liu's story about tornadoes in Dallas. She got it out a few days after tornadoes struck Dallas in mid-October, and it had really solid imagery. It really portrayed the devastation, the humanity behind the event. It was part 1 of a part 2 series, and I wrote part 2. And the pictures helped a lot too from Sydney Rowe. And it was actually so good that last minute we put it in print. Even though we hadn't decided to initially, we ended up putting it in issue 2 of print.
Nice. What would you say to the naysayers that think that news writing can't be powerful?
I think people have this preconception because they think because it's objective and because it's like the facts, it can't be emotional. But I think that's far from the truth because although like we're not supposed to put our opinions into it usually, the whole point is that we like dig deep into the opinions and emotions of our sources. So rather than like focusing on our own emotions to make it powerful, we just harness other people's emotions instead. That's the only difference between like news writing and opinions writing. Not the only difference, but that's like where the power comes from differently.
Yeah. Well, there's clearly a complexity to it.
Yeah.
It's not just, okay, we can't put our own opinion in it, so we won't put it. So
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. Which staff member has shown the most growth in news writing?
A lot of staff writers have shown growth this year, but I would like to point out Shreya Beldona because recently she's covered several events for news this year. She's gotten an advance and everything, and then also she has been really interested in enterprise this year, which I really love because not a lot of people have shown a lot of passion for enterprise this year, except for a few editors, but she's one of the only non-editors who's really cared about enterprise, and one example of that is her California story, where she talked about how a lot of people have been coming from California to Texas and all the different like effects and consequences and advantages and disadvantages of that. It was probably one of the most in-depth stories I've seen published on Sidekick. So
it's good. Nice content. Give me a rundown of this semester's biggest, widest reaching news and enterprise stories.
I would say that our widest reaching stories or like most important stories have been center spreads, and that's for a reason because they're the main part of each issue and they have to be important. The first one was by Nick Pransky, the executive copy and design editor, and it was about the 60-year CISD anniversary, and like he took a few different angles on it. It was about the history of Coppell and the growth, everything like that, and I think that was like a really good center spread because it was so local and like you wouldn't find that in any other newspaper. And then second issue, Shivi Sharma wrote a story about the teenage job landscape changing and like the future of teenage jobs and the different things that teenagers have been doing to earn money that's different from the past. And again, I liked how that obviously was applicable to CHS students, but it also could have a wider reach. It could be applied to other students in other schools as well. And for our third issue, the December issue, Sally Parampatil was the writer. And since that issue might not have came out yet, I don't want to say too many details, but it's about race in sports. It can also be applied to more than just Coppell students, but it also has a Coppell angle as well.
Awesome. So these are wide-reaching stories that, I don't know, someone in New York can read, and they still kind of connect with them.
Yeah.
That's cool. How is it like to assign these big stories? How do you avoid preferential treatment of staff writers who have already earned their stripes, per se?
Well, in general, when I'm assigning stories, not necessarily just for these, but my editor's style is that I tend to help people a lot with their short requests and stuff unless they're like a really experienced writer. So I usually like help them find sources and stuff like that, and I just check up on them a lot. and I probably should start doing that less next semester as there's more like experienced writers. But if it's an experienced writer, I generally try to be a little more hands-off. Like, I'll definitely help them if I need to, but I don't want to like be too controlling about it. And I actually think about the second part of what you said a lot about like balancing giving new opportunities to like rising staff members versus relying too much on people you know will do it. And I think it just depends on the story. Like for Center Spread, I would never give it to someone that I didn't already know could do it. Like Nick Pransky, Shivi Sharma, and Sally Parampacho are 3 people who have like proved themselves. I know they'll get it done, like no matter what. So that's why I decided to give them it. But for smaller stories, I generally try to give it to new staff members first so that they can like start building their way up.
Yeah, makes sense. What components would you like to see implemented in your news section, both online and in print?
Well, I want to start getting video with...
Sorry, can you restart?
Sorry. I want to start getting video with every coverage event just because I feel like that's a really simple way to get videos and increase that presence. And it'll also help photographers like practice their video skills. And I want to include more photo essays in news.
Okay. Does your position as the only executive news and enterprise editor ever weigh you down?
Well, last year I was copy editor and I always sort of wanted a section, so I'm definitely happy to be in charge of 1 or 2 technically, but I don't have as much time to write what I want to write sometimes because although I think the news section is very important, obviously, I actually kind of like writing opinions and entertainment stories more, and that's what I did a lot of sophomore and junior year, but now I have to prioritize news stories because I have to like look out for my section first. So like if there's a story in my section that needs to be written quick, then I'll do it if I need to instead of like writing an opinion story that I want to write. So I've mostly been writing news and sports this year just because sports has been needing a lot of like help because there's so many coverage things to do, and then of course news. I wouldn't say it weighs me down, it just shifted what I do on staff.
Okay. How would you like to see your sections next semester?
Well, next semester, since I'm going to be a second semester senior, I won't have to focus on school as much. And I know for a lot of people, like they feel more unmotivated second semester of senior year, but I don't want to take that as a bad thing. I want to instead like harness that into my energy for sidekick. So I feel like next semester, like even now as I'm thinking about it, I'm going to just focus on only sidekick basically. Like I'll do my minimums for classes, but like my priority is gonna be sidekick like far and wide. So that's why I plan to like beef up my section a lot next semester when I'm gonna have more time and I plan to like get at least 6 stories a week and at least 3 videos a week, like even if I have to write some of those myself and take videos myself, since I won't have as much schoolwork to stress about, I'll be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, I wish you luck, Pramika. Special thanks to our guest, Pramika. Thank you all for joining us in the 32nd episode of the Penny Podcast. Links to the material I mentioned today can be found below. See y'all next week.
My favorite color, I used to pretend that I don't like these colors, but I actually really like light pink and purple. I used to pretend that I don't. Okay, you know what? This is going way too long. I'm just gonna keep this simple.
No, this is awesome. No, I'm keeping this in. No, okay, this is the most complex answer for any color that I've gotten.
Okay, do the snap thing, and then I'll restart it.
Okay.